Hello everybody, Ask Dutch Anything, episode 77 it is. Dutch is on Cameo, by the way, links coming on that soon. I can't remember what the plugs we've got, but we're going to get straight into this. Oh yeah, that is of course the main thing. Questions for Dutch at gmail.com is the email you use to write into this show. Submit your questions for this very show that happens every single Sunday, or most Sundays anyway. And that's what everybody on this list did. So Dutch, are you ready?
I am ready. Hey, we didn't tell the people why we missed 2 weeks, or did you?
I was on holiday, you were moving. And I only found out that you were moving
Because I told you.
No, someone else told me.
Okay.
And then I messaged you and said, you moved? And I went, yep.
Okay.
So there you go. Right, okay, first question. It's not really a question, just something nice to hear. Well, not nice in certain things, but Doug says, Dutch going through recovery of bone cancer and over 20 operations, but still alive and walking. Heard all your shows and all have helped me relax enough to sleep. I guess because you and Buck Robley were my favourite heels watching in Shreveport TV with my grandmother. Take care and stay well. You are loved and appreciated. P.S. You and Buck made my Southern Baptist grandma cuss every Saturday. So there you go.
Betty's from Louisiana.
Oh, yeah.
Is that where he's from?
Yep, it says on Shreveport TV, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Buck Robley, there's a name you don't hear much. And I've heard Buck was a hard-ass son of a bitch to get along with. And he was a booker sometimes. So I met him, and he was just he was about half soused about half the time. And he was a hell of a heel, though. People literally hated him. Of course, on the out of wrestling, people really hated him too. So, but anyway, if I can, to the gentleman who wrote in, if I'm helping you in any way, I'm proud of it. So I want you to hang in there, get better, and there's a lot of story time with Dutches to come. So I want you to be around to hear them.
Very good. Rob from Portsmouth, you writes in, says, hi, Dutch and James, great podcast. I love hearing the stories. My question is, who would be Dutch's ultimate number one pick for an opponent? This could be anyone from the past and current, and yes, when Dutch was at his peak condition. Many thanks. So, one person to wrestle one more time. Who would it be and why?
Well, I don't have one, but I have several. So I'll just list the several. One of them would be Jerry Lawler. One thing Jerry had, he understood the business and he had perfect timing. Because if you watch Lawler, he doesn't do a lot of things, but he does them at the right time. And he listens to fans. So he was, his timing was impeccable, and his work was good. And he wasn't known, I don't think, for a move. And he threw a hell of a punch. So you watch Lawler, when he threw that punch, it looked like he nailed you. So he would be one. Randy Savage would be another one. Because to work with Savage, you better be in shape. Because Savage, from the opening bell to the ending bell, was about 100%. And if you wanted to stay in the ring with him, you better be in good shape, and your cardio should be good, or you're going to be sucking wind. But it was a contest to be in the match with Randy Savage. Another one would be Brad Armstrong. Great performer. He was probably the best. I've never seen him make a mistake. Never saw him. I was never in the ring and made a mistake. And I would go like 15 minutes with him a lot of nights. But he was there, and he should be the one to teach guys to sell, because he knew how to sell. And I had one more, and I can't remember his name now, but those would be the ones I'd like to have one more match with.
I don't think I've ever asked you this before. If you have to pick one, what's your all-time favorite match?
Well, that I was in.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say me and Lawler in Memphis when I beat him. I love that. Because Lawler's defeats when he got pinned, there's not a lot of them out there. And I beat him clean. He's been beaten, but usually with somebody would throw powder in his face or hit him with something else and knock him out and pin him. But I actually beat him straight up 1, 2, 3. And I think I'm the only one who ever did that when he was a babyface. So, and the only reason I beat him, I brought it up to him. I said, you know what would make people sit up and take notice? He said, what? I said, if I beat you clean. He had never heard that before. And because it never happened. I said, because this is when we went head to head. See, I wasn't the heel. He wasn't the heel. But I wasn't the baby face. And he wasn't the baby face. The crowd was split. And I wouldn't say, it's 50-50 or 40-30, 40-60. And even in all the towns that we went to in the Memphis territory, it was 40-60 and or 50-50 in Memphis. That was his town. In Nashville, I was the baby face, 80-20. Lawler couldn't believe that either. And the other two, the towns it was 50-50. But we taped the match when I beat him straight up and played it on the TV. That's what made people sit up and say they thought it was a shoot. But he never, I don't know why they say it was a shoot. We worked no differently, but again, I'm talking about the story. They thought that we legitimately didn't like each other because we had good arguments on TV. It's like you'd almost argue in real life. Because I told him, I said, when we go out here and talk about this, let's talk about, we really disagree on it. And Lawler, if there's one thing he can do, he can argue like a bastard. He's good in an argument. I'm good in an argument and then the people were saying, yeah, well, Jerry made a good point. Oh yeah. And then I'd come back and I'd make another point and say, wait a minute. Dutch made a good point too. So now it was legitimate. And so, and we drew a lot of money with that program. And we only faced off against each other about 3 times during that particular run.
Mm-hmm. Next question. Jim from South Dakota says, Dutch, both you and Dick Murdoch were in the WWF in 1995, but as best I can tell, he appeared for one match, and that was sort of it. He just seems to be brought onto the road to keep the boys entertained for 6 months. What did Dick Murdoch do in the WWF in 1995, if anything?
I don't remember him doing anything, really. I don't know, 1995.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him there, but I don't know. And I guess he would go on the road. I remember Dick being around there, but not that much. But he is an entertaining, if you sit around and listen to Dick Murdoch, you will be entertained, really entertained. I remember one time, and this is Puerto Rico, he brought this really big guy in. He was about 7 foot tall, and he was a heel, I guess. No, babyface, yeah. But Dick told him to go out there and do something one night, and him and this big guy, I'd say his name was down Gordo or whatever, but he went out there and he was complaining that his opponent didn't work with him. But anyway, Dick heard about it and then told him to get beat one night. He didn't want to get beat. And I remember Dick going to the ring after about 5 or 6 minutes because the big guy wouldn't sell. Dick literally, not literally, he did it. He beat him up. He punched him 3 or 4 times, threw him out of the ring, and they called for a bell. It was a DQ. And he just beat the crap out of the guy and left him laying. For no reason that he was mad at him. And then he come back. And I said, "What the hell was that?" "I don't know, man. I guess Dick likes me." And he never said a word to it to Dick. But Dick was the booker, told him to do it. He didn't want to do it, so Dick took it in his own hands to correct it and went out in the ring and just beat the crap out of the guy. The guy left the next day. So
do you do actually? So you do remember Dick in the WWF, but he just sort of just seemed to just be there, and then he just wasn't there, because as far as I can tell, he never wrestled. He wrestled once. He was like a Royal Rumble participant briefly, and then best I can tell, he was just hired. Either. No, so he wasn't an agent either.
No, he was just there around. I guess Vince just say, "Oh, I'll bring him in," and just for the dressing room, I guess. He told some great stories.
It was a good job to have.
Huh?
It's a good job to have. Didn't he also work for like the Coors Brewing Company or something?
I have no idea.
And all he had to do was just go to bars and drink and talk, and that was it.
Dick Murdoch, I was in Mid-Atlantic, and when Dusty was the booker. So I went in there, and Dick was there. So we went to one town about 100 miles from Charlotte, and I went out after my match. I went out to watch Dick, and I forgot who Dickie was working with. He did absolutely nothing in that match except pander to the crowd, play to the crowd. He took an arm drag and he sold it so convincingly. The people got into it. He would make those faces, and he'd get up and he'd roll out of the ring and he'd hold his back and he'd cry and he'd holler at the people. He did this for 5 minutes and had the people, and that was the match. And then he got in the ring, and I forgot what he did. I think he beat the guy or something, and he had a lot of heat, and he was limping out of the ring, still selling the arm drag that happened in the first minute. I have never seen any performer ever get more out of a simple move than Dick Murdoch, because he exactly knew what to do, because he broke in out in the Amarillo days with the Funks and with Dusty and with Stan Hansen. They were all there at the same time. So you talking about an all-star lineup and didn't know it, but that's what they had in Amarillo, probably in the late 70s and early 80s.
I still like that story with Dick Murdoch, where he played in like the alumni game at West Texas State. He just convinced them that he'd been there, and he'd never been there.
Yeah, he never was there. I asked him, because that's where the Funks played. I think they played football there.
Tito, Ted DiBiase.
West Texas State was their school. And so he played in an alumni game and convinced them that he went there?
Yes.
I'd never heard that story. But if there was anybody to convince someone else of something that didn't happen, it would be Dickie, because he could do it.
I think that's pretty much the right story. Someone correct me if I'm wrong then. We'll move on.
No, that is believable to me, knowing Dickie and knowing how he loved football. So, and all his other buddies were playing in it, so I'm going to play in it too. So he told him he was there.
Next one, John Sebastian from Montreal says, 2 questions. In recent years, I noticed that over, push, heat, kayfabe, gimmick, mark, etc. are now so big they're literally outside of the business, and it's a fan base. So much in everyday modern mainstream vernacular that people who aren't also fans use them. I mean, some of those words were already used in common lexicon anyway, but some aren't. Dutch, do you recall any of the Carny terms that stopped being used with time? The stuff that got lost to time that no one has used inside the business for decades?
Terms that stopped being used?
Yeah, so inside of wrestling terms that don't get used.
Well, okay, inside the business, I don't think they use the term kayfabe anymore. They don't. Rarely do they use that. Because I've been in dressing room and used the inside language. A lot of guys wouldn't know what I was talking about. But they were too embarrassed to say, "What's that mean?" Because you were in the dressing room and we just thought you would know what these certain words mean. Read some of those other words.
These are some of the obvious ones like over or push or heat or gimmick or mark or whatever. Those kinds of things. They're all well used and everything. But are there any words that stand out that just don't get used anymore that used to be used a lot?
Inside the business.
Yeah.
Well, we still use the push. We still use that. Get over. We use that. Or it's still used, I'm sure. I don't know. I would have to think about that a little more than I just heard the question just now. So I heard it earlier and I could have stored up and you ought to say, well, I thought you read these questions. Well, I did, but I didn't have an answer then.
Well, there's a follow-up.
But I tell you, rap music has taken a lot of those words, and that they use them because they like the Carny language we talk. You know how that works?
Yeah, but that's something that doesn't happen in wrestling anymore. Is people talk Carny to each other?
No, because that was to me even when I got in. You know, if it was short and simple, I could understand it. But if it was more than that, it's a totally different language. So you would use it in front of people who you had no other way to say it. So you'd take what you wanted to say, put it in Carny and say it. So, and sometimes the guy would understand it, sometimes he wouldn't. But to me, you'd have to really think about it and think faster than what I could at the time to get the meaning of what they were saying.
There's a follow-up.
But you know how it worked, right?
Oh, yeah, you like is. You like the first letter and they put is or whiz or something.
You take like you're going to say, look over there. You'd
be
say,
like Lizook.
Lizook is over there. But I think if you said it wrong, the people could figure it out just if it was short. So, but you would take the first letter and put is after the first letter and then the other syllable.
There's a follow-up question here. Were there any Carny terms that were specific to regions?
No, not really. I don't think.
I mean, there were differences here because instead of babyface, it was blue eye.
Where?
Here, in the UK, yeah.
Blue eye?
Yeah.
Well, that makes no sense whatsoever. So if an English wrestler came up to me and says, "Are you a blue eye mate?" I went, "I don't think so."
So an English wrestler who's actually Australian then, I guess.
Is that what it sounds like?
Yes, it is, yes.
Well, I had a lot of English guys I couldn't understand. John Foley, sometimes I couldn't understand a word he said. I said, "John, slow down and let me understand it." And a few other English guys. Les Thornton was kind of hard. Billy Robinson, too. And if they slow, because I think the English speak quite fast. Yes or no?
Can do.
Yeah. So you'd be hard to understand because you do speak fast.
Like, you've just named 3 wrestlers all from Manchester or thereabouts.
Well, then aren't you from there?
Yeah.
Then you should,
You can understand me though, but I do make an effort to speak slowly, or more slowly than I would do on this. And I'm not saying, and I mean that in general. I like whenever I'm doing an interview or anything, I try and speak slower than I normally do.
Yeah, but I think your speech is more Americanized now than I think what it was.
I don't think it's Americanized. I just make sure to enunciate a lot.
Yeah, but you over enunciate too. That's how we know.
I over enunciate.
But I can understand you though.
Oh, good. As long as we understand each other, right? Let's carry on. Zach, Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. Do you know that place?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Muhlenberg County.
Muhlenberg County. I'm sorry. Says, "Hey, Dutch and James, I watch and enjoy your podcast with my dad, who watched Memphis wrestling with my grandpa. On a fairly regular basis, my dad brings up Tojo Yamamoto. Any stories about Tojo?" He doesn't come up too often in these questions, does he?
Oh, no, but Tojo was, excuse the word, he was brutal. Because he stayed in character all the time. So if you were a fan and he went into the building, he would look at you with those squinty eyes he had, He scared. He wasn't big, but he scared the crap out of fans because he just look at him and he wasn't big, but people thought he was lethal. They told the story. He was a judo champion. He was this. He was at karate and all this kind of stuff. And he would do the chops. And see, when wrestling was kind of new, he was around in those days too. People believed him. So, but I remember a story about Tojo. He would chop the living crap out of you. I mean, hard. He brought two guys over. He was managing them, I think, in Memphis. And then the story came out. These Japanese guys didn't understand English. And Tojo, like, since he was Japanese, but he really wasn't Japanese, but he spoke Japanese.
Was he Hawaiian like all the other Japanese guys?
He was guys? Hawaiian who posed as Japanese, and everybody believed it because they had no reason to disbelieve it. See, he was from, his family was from Hawaii, so he spoke Japanese and English. But a couple of Japanese guys came over, and it was discovered that Tojo was taking their money somehow, some way. And Tojo was also in managing two other guys. These were American guys. And they found out he was doing something like that. So one night in Memphis, this really happened. It was a battle royal. And these guys, who I can't remember their names now, they weren't there long. They were left in the ring, and there was about 6 people left. They both turned on Tojo and literally, I mean, as a shoot, beat the crap out of him. They blacked both his eyes, cut both his eyes, his nose was bleeding. I mean, and almost knocked him out, didn't quite knock him out. And then threw themselves over the top rope, left, went back to the dressing room, grabbed their bags, which had been pre-packed because they had this plan, and went out the door, and nobody ever saw them again. But whatever it was they had against Tojo, they took out on him that night in Memphis, and we never knew why, because nobody ever knew that. But Tojo had apparently either taken something from them or stolen something from them, and they were just getting even and leaving.
Did he have a reputation for that kind of thing?
I don't think so, not then. But I remember one time I had a match, a pole match with him, and I came down with the bullwhip. And I remember when I was breaking in, Tojo used to chop, like I said, he chopped especially green guys because they were afraid to come back, afraid they'd get fired or something. Brother, I lined Tojo up, and I saw his eyes get big, like, oh God. Brother, I laced his ass shoulder to ankles. And I hit him about 3 times and popped it right in the right spot. And he was all, yeah. He was hopping around me, yeah. And he took off. And I didn't see him again to the next night. And he said, oh. And he says, you throw it hard last night. I said, oh, I'm sorry. It was a potato. How can you get a potato 3 times, especially with a bullwhip? You have to want to throw it. But he never knew it. But in my mind, I was repaying him for all those hard chops. It was the receipt that was 5 years in the making. So I made it and delivered it that night. And I thought to myself, well, he'll know what it's for.
You said, when you first saw him, he was staring you out and squinting at you and stuff. Was he like Abdullah the Butcher, where you weren't sure where he was actually, or you thought he was really Japanese for like months on end before you talked to him?
No, I did. You know where I read? Where I read he was from Hawaii? Online.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yeah, that he's really from Hawaii, and like his family were there from World War II. And I guess they were in, I don't know if he was, but I think that his family was in the camp there. I guess they would intern all the Japanese in like California and Hawaii or the West Coast because they didn't know if they were spies or not.
Oh, yeah. Next question. Pete from Portland, Oregon. Hi, Dutch, long-time listener, first-time emailer. I was wondering about the physical punishment that wrestlers took and how much they were able to withstand. Just stubbing a toe is world-ending to me, so I'm curious if that kind of thing even phases wrestlers, or do they suffer through it like the rest of us? And do you have any stories of wrestlers who had uncharacteristically low thresholds for pain?
Well, most of them probably. Yeah, wrestling does take it out of your body. Because you can imagine just taking an ordinary slam in a ring that's not too bad. Most guys couldn't get up, I would say. Well, not most. Well, I would say most guys, but I guess the bodybuilders could. But it takes a while to get used to. That's why you got to train. Not only train to learn timing, you got to train your body too. Because you take, and imagine taking a chair or taking a table shot or taking a power bomb, taking a power slam. Those things, after a while, you get used to them, but you're still punishing your body. And you don't feel it then when you're young. You feel it when you get older. And I'm feeling it right now. My back is out. And I walk with a limp, but hey, I may walk with a limp anyway. I mean, football players have the same thing. Athletes have the same thing because they've used their body all these years. But a wrestler without the body, he doesn't really have a career. So, yeah, and there's a lot of wrestlers walking around that really their health has been affected by the business. And I think if they had to do it over again, I think they'd do it over again. I think the business is enjoyable. The business is what you make it. It's like anything else. You can have a good time, you can have a miserable time. So it's better to have a good time, no matter the amount of money you make.
Absolutely. Just to go on the last bit of the question, were there any wrestlers who were uncharacteristic as far as having low thresholds for pain and didn't want to do anything because everything would hurt them?
Well, I think if they come back to the dressing room and say, "Oh, I'm hurting," and finally the guys will say, "Shut the hell up! My God, why are you bitching so much?" I can't remember anybody now.
I've got a name.
What is it?
Austin Idol.
Oh, I was getting ready to. You couldn't even touch his hair. You know how he talks. Hey, ho. I locked up with him one time. And he said, "What's the hair? No, what's the wig?" That's what he said. He didn't have a wig on, but it was like, "What's the hair?" Oh, you tag him a little harder, a little bit. Oh my God, it's like the end of the world. Here's another one. I can't remember the name now.
What territory?
Honky Tonk Man. He was another one.
I know you can't see this, but I just wrote Honky Tonk Man there as well.
Okay, yeah, he was another one too. Hey, what's this? What's that? But those were the two. But anyway, they didn't mean it in a bad way. They meant, well, hey, just don't get loose with your punches or watch what you're throwing out there. They were just saying they probably got tagged one time by somebody and didn't want to get tagged again. I mean, tagged like popped. So that's what I mean.
With Honky, he did the shake, rattle, and roll, the spinning neck breaker thing.
Yeah.
On the Indies in the 90s, after he left the WWF, and probably ever since, he would do that. But then, obviously he did it on TV. He'd take a bump as well. But on the Indies, he just rolled them through, and then he'd just stand there while the other guy took a bump, and then he pinned them. He didn't take a single bump.
That's what they do.
Hey, I tell you what, he walks around just fine. So, who's the...
Well, he wasn't ever... He took bumps, but he didn't... I've seen some guys, their whole career was taking those big bumps. Like that was a guy called the Hines brothers one time. They took fantastic bumps. They stayed in the air more than they walked around in the mat because they weren't big guys, but they would just fly. They'd take a backdrop and sometimes go 10 feet in the air. We used to have contests in certain towns. Like I remember Carrollton, Georgia had a low, not a super low ring light, but it was still that if you took a high enough backdrop, your heel would touch the light. So we used to have who could touch the light tonight. So, but whenever I was in that contest, so we'd have it like one every 6 months. I always touched it. I didn't win one straight out, but I tied one time for first place because I touched the light. And in a little building, when you touch the light, then the light in the building is going this side. The shadows are going that way. Crazy.
Oh, one more thing for Honky Tonk Man. His username on eBay is No Bumps.
Oh, yeah, that's him.
Classic stuff. Okay.
Well, after a while, if you work with Wayne, you kind of knew that. Don't give me any bumps. Because you say, oh, wait a minute, I don't think I can. Ida would always do that too. Oh, no, let's not do that.
Next one. I don't think we've got time for that one because it's going to be a bit long, unfortunately. So we'll save that for next week. So we'll move on. Next one, Todd, Columbus, Ohio. Good day, gentlemen. I recently revisited WCW Super Brawl 5 and an undercard match featured Bunkhouse Buck. I always thought this guy was just enhancement talent, but when I looked him up, he was actually a WCW tag champ with Dick Slater. Furthermore, I saw he was briefly Jack Swagger Sr. in WW, which in fact you replaced him. Yeah, as not his father, but you were basically the sort of.
I was his uncle, really.
Yeah, and he wrestled in Smoky Mountain. Did you ever interact with Bunkhouse Buck? Any stories you could share? Thank you.
Oh, Bunkhouse Buck, great guy.
It was Jimmy Golden, wasn't it?
Jimmy Golden,
yeah,
great guy, and he was the son of a promoter. Can't remember his name now, but anyway, he promoted, and he's a cousin to the Fullers, and he was in the wrestling business, and he was a tall, lanky young man when he was younger. He probably didn't weigh 170, but over the years, and he never was really heavy. He was always more tall than he was heavy. Good worker, just wasn't a good talker. And a great guy. So, and what was the question? Do I remember any stories about him?
Yeah, because you worked with him in Smoky and wherever else. Was he in the Fuller Territory when you were?
Was he in the military?
No, the Fuller Territory.
Oh yeah, he was. I went to Birmingham one time when the Fullers had it, and he was there because that family's going to stay together anyway. So. And Ron Fuller had the right idea about it. He'd just buy a territory and put his family to work. He had his crew that were all related to him. So, and that's why if you get a chance to watch some of I forgot the name of the company.
Was it like Continental?
Continental.
Like
Continental. They really had some good stuff because Bob Armstrong and his crew, and then Ron Fuller and his crew, they had enough family there to almost outfit the crew without bringing anybody in. So it was, and I really liked the way Ron Fuller did business because Ron was like his dad, buddy. Ron, he's going to give you this angle, right? And he said, okay, like he's going to give it to you, James. He said, okay, James, I want you to come in there and I want you to play to that crowd and I want you to get them up and then your opponent's going to come and y'all look at each other and then all of a sudden y'all bust out and then y'all start fighting and blah, blah, blah. And after a while, when he's talking that, you're going, yeah, you're getting excited. And he tells you all about this man, just like his daddy did, what to do. And you would get excited hearing it. And then when he would get to the end, he'd say, okay. And then all of a sudden, he'll just catch you with a small package, 1, 2, 3, and roll out of the ring. And And you were so happy, you were so excited, you were looking forward to going out there and putting the guy over because he sold it so well. And then when you came back, what he would say is, "Oh man, what a great match." See, now if you can hear stuff like that and you can hear just some appreciation and a thought about how the match was that what you wanted? Yeah, it was great. It actually makes you feel good. So they were masters at that, and I enjoyed working that territory with those guys.
Any more stories specific to Jimmy Golden?
I'm trying to think, but I can't remember right now. I really can't.
Yeah, I just remember like unusually tall, always wore a duster.
Yeah, and good worker, excellent worker.
Next question. George said, Spencer says, the wrestling territories from the late 60s to the mid-80s seem to be talked about very highly from the wrestlers who got to work in that era. Promotions had fresh talent rotating in and out, etc. The wrestlers had a much longer shelf life. We all know how and why this system ended. My question for you is, if you were riding in the car with the other wrestlers, what was the reputation of some of the territories that you did not personally work? Like, did you hear from guys about places like West Texas, Calgary, the AWA, the WWF, and Portland? So what
that's where I learned about where I wanted to go and where I didn't want to go.
Yeah. So what was the word on the street on some of the territories you didn't work?
Kansas City was probably low money, not a lot of money there, and it was just like they had wrestling, but it was just a so-so attendance.
I know, but that was like the hub, wasn't it, as well, for the NWA? So they get all the stars.
That was St.
Was that St. Louis?
St. Louis.
Yeah.
Kansas City, they ran Topeka, they run Wichita and Des Moines, Iowa, and so it wasn't highly regarded. I mean, the people were okay, but you had two bookers like Bob Geigel and what was the other name of the world champion one time?
Pat O'Connor.
Pat O'Connor.
Yeah.
And to me, they weren't really creative minds. They knew how to do business, but they didn't know really how to tell a story, I don't think. Calgary had, they said I've never been there, and I still wouldn't even consider going there. They say you leave on a Monday or Tuesday and you're not better back to Saturday or whatever. You're on the road all the time, different place, hotel every night. And I didn't want to do that. So I learned that that's not a good place to go. Kansas City is not a good place to go. And Nashville for Nick Goulas. Don't go there because there's no money there.
Well, you went there. You know it.
I went there, but I went there because they changed bookers, and he gave me a guarantee that I would make X number of dollars every week, no matter what the houses were. Now, but it didn't matter because me and Savage were there, and the houses came up. So we were actually earning our money, and if we had to went under a guarantee, we'd have made more than the guarantee. But hey, we agreed to work in the company in that territory for X number of dollars. So as long as they were keeping their word, they wanted me to keep mine, and so I did. And you see another Amarillo was another one. They said it was entertaining as hell because you had Terry Funk there. They said it was damn entertaining as hell, but they still had those long trips. So that's what I was trying to avoid. Now, some territories would pop up, like San Antonio popped up. That was the Blanchards. Mm-hmm. And it was a new territory, and I was scheduled to go out there, and I don't know what happened. I didn't go. But I heard it was a pretty good territory. We heard that. And of course, everybody wanted to go to Mid-Atlantic. Everybody wanted to go to Florida. Everybody wanted to go to, of course, New York with Vince McMahon Sr. running it. Everybody wanted to go there. Vern Gagne, the Minnesota territory, was more or less off limits because they had a totally different style. I mean, they had more of a wrestling style, and they would have a crew that would stay intact for years. I don't think Nick Bockwinkel, I don't think he ever worked anywhere else, did he? Where did he work?
He worked Memphis occasionally, didn't he? He used to come
Yeah,
down.
he made shots, but I'm saying
Yeah.
he worked another territory as a regular.
That's something I have to look up. But yeah, he was AWA through and through pretty much.
And their style was different than what I was used to. See, I went to Florida one time and they said, "Where'd you come from?" And I had just come from Nick Goulas. I said, "The territory you don't work," and I found out why. That's why I went to Florida. I wasn't there long. And they said, "Oh, don't try any of that damn Tennessee crap here. It won't get over." I said, "What do you mean?" "Oh, they want wrestling, you know." And I watched the matches and I went, "What the hell? This is no different than what they did up there. I mean, what's the guy talking about?" Then I watched him, and his match was the most boringest match I forgot who told me. But I said, "No wonder you," I didn't tell him this, but I said, "No wonder you had to get another place to work because you're about boring as watching paint dry. My God." So I said, "This is the same thing." So I went out there and accented it a little bit, and the people got up. They got excited. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to excite the people. So they look at their ticket prices. Well, it was worth it because those guys worked hard, and I was entertained for 2.5 hours or whatever. But I didn't listen. Tony, his name was Tony Maroney.
Oh yeah, we spoke with Marino. We spoke about him not long ago. In
Marino.
fact, yeah.
He was about boring as hell. He was. So I think he's passed away now. So I don't mean to talk ill of the dead, but
Yeah, only just. I think he was in his 90s as well, so one of like the longest lived wrestlers. Just because I was looking up Nick Bockwinkel, he started his career in Los Angeles, which is another territory.
That's another place not to go. I don't think I would like Los Angeles anyway because half their crew is Mexican anyway because that's their audience. So, and what was their arena called?
Was it the Olympic Coliseum or something like that?
Olympic. It was the Olympic,
Yeah.
yes. And I've heard stories about it, but I never heard a lot of. They said the trips were like super short because the population is so high. You know, a 50-mile trip was 60-mile trip was long for them. They say, "Oh God, I got to go to somewhere close by. I got to go to Anaheim." I guess it's right there, but the trips were short, and I don't think the pay was that well.
What about San Francisco?
And that was a good territory. They talked very highly about San Francisco. You had guys who spent a career there. Pat Patterson, for one, he was almost. They said it was a good territory, but Roy Shires was the promoter.
Mm-hmm.
Brother, I'm pulling names out of my butt today.
Hey, Don Morocco, because he used to tell me about Roy Shire. I think he hated Roy Shire. He was not the best person to work for.
Well, he was a perfectionist. And if you didn't do this right, he would, and I never met him. I'm just hearing stories about him. Oh, he would just raise hell because when people bought a ticket, he wanted the matches to be, if anybody said anything bad about a match, he took it as a personal insult. And he would come in, he would let the talent know, from what I hear, he would let the talent know in the dressing room that it wasn't appreciated. So Don knew him well, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, he worked for him for years, yeah. He was not the biggest fan of Roy Shire.
And did he say he could cuss out guys and raise hell? And
yeah, what I remember is Don always used to say, Roy Shire, I think I'm right in saying this, always used to have a really horrible habit of getting his fingernails and scratching his tongue constantly, like, and going, and spitting. And he said it used to drive Don crazy.
But I heard, I just took a drink of that coffee and it went down wrong. But I heard he was a perfectionist and he was a booker first. Him and Pat Patterson. That's how Patterson learned to book.
It's where the Royal Rumble came from as well. At least the germ of the idea of the Royal Rumble came from San Francisco.
Probably. But I've read that too. So that had to be a Pat Patterson idea or a Roy Shires idea anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I heard it was a good territory. You made good money. Trips were short. So, and I always wanted to go there. I could have put up with Frisco, I think.
Next question. We'll do two more, I think. So George says, hi, James and Dutch. I saw a wrestling card from 1980 that both yourself and Chief J Strongbow were on.
Yep.
Did you ever work against or with him, and what did you think of him?
Oh, I did. I was in Florida, I think.
Yeah.
And I did work against Chief. And what I remember is I did the around the ring before the match started, and he beat the crap out of me. But he was very easy. What he wanted to do, next to nothing, which was right in my playbook, next to nothing. And he wasn't a high flyer. He didn't get in a rush because he was older than I would say I was back in those days. I was 24, 25. He was probably in his late 40s anyway, maybe early 50s, but easy to work with. People responded to him. He knew his gimmick, knew his style, and he'd play his music, and he'd come out, and he had that big headdress on, and he looked good. And I think he lived for years, I think, right outside Atlanta, because I think he worked Atlanta as not Strongbow. He worked under another name.
Joe Scarpa.
Oh, okay. That was his name.
I think his real name was Luke Scarpa, but yeah, Joe Scarpa is what he wrestled under.
And he took the Indian gimmick and stole it from him. And he's not even Indian. What the hell? What could be more insulting than somebody stealing a heritage and using it to make money?
He was Italian.
But he looked Indian to me, and he did a good dance. So
yeah, because I've seen matches with Chief J Strongbow, and then he does like the Hulk, like a pre-hulking up kind of thing, and then he goes.
Then he goes, and he stomped and around the ring a little bit. He wouldn't get carried away with that either, but the people, they would get with it. And then they would do the finish right after that. So they would get up when he did the comeback, and all of a sudden when he did the finish, 1, 2, 3, they'd pop big, he'd roll out of the ring, it's over. People, you'd leave him in a good mood.
What do you think of him as an agent? He was the WWF agent probably until about 95, which is when you were there. So you would have had him for at least a few months, I guess. But he is maybe the most divisive agent. You either loved him or hated him, I guess, is what I gather. How did you find him?
Well, agents, I think this is what's misunderstood about agents. Agents don't tell you how to do a match. They give you what they want.
I was going to say then they didn't. Maybe it might be different now.
Well, they may give you a little more. I think they almost agent it too much, because you can't do every move. You really can't. I think you would get burnt out like a son of a gun. But you got to listen. You say, okay, me and you are going to have a match. They come in there. Okay, guys. They would say, James, we need you over in about 6 minutes. Okay, I'll be back. Over, right? Sometimes that's all they give you. And it was up to me and you to come up with a finish. So we would come up with one, and he'd come back, what do you got? And we would tell him, and he would adjust this or adjust that or do this, and then we're good to go. Because it was up to us to actually do the work and figure it out, because an agent can't come in there and give you every move. He just can't. That's up to the talent. And if the talent's good enough, you can get yourself over even by losing a match. Because if you show something that Vince liked, then he would say, I bet if we did something with this kid, he might be able to do something. I'm not saying he could headline WrestleMania, but you could be used in a better spot. So that was the wrestler's job. The talent would just deliver the message of what was needed in this particular match. And sometimes the agent takes it and says, take this out, take this out. But I doubt if Strongbow in those days would take anything out. He might have taken, today he couldn't even work today's product at all because he wouldn't understand it.
We'll end on this question from Jason. Hey, Dutch and James, I was watching Dutch do commentary on Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and he dropped a line that was like, no one likes to see a man cry, not even his ex-wife. Which made me laugh. Later, I think I heard Cornette use the same line. It made me wonder, where did this line originate? Did Cornette steal it from Dutch or vice versa, or is it stolen from someone else entirely? And does Dutch have any other favourite lines in his pocket for doing commentary? So, where did that line come from, and did Cornette steal it from you?
I made it up on the spot. Wait a minute, I was going to tell Jason, who did you hear it from first? Me? I thought so. Who'd you hear it with second? From second? Cornette. So who stole who from what? Cornette stole it from me. And which him stealing it is actually a compliment. Does that mean he liked it? So, that was my original line because I really loved doing commentary in Smoky Mountain because nobody told me what to say. Nobody told me when to say it. I wasn't doing a commercial doing a match or anything. We were just calling wrestling in its purest form. Me and Mr. Bob, what was his Caudell? Caudell. I never really knew his name. And I grew up watching him when I was a kid because he was one of the main announcers in Mid-Atlantic in North Carolina. And when Cornette told me he was going to be the lead announcer, I was actually excited about working with him, and a great guy. So, but I came up with the line and Cornette stole it from me, the thieving bastard.
Did Cornette steal any more of your lines?
Probably, but I can't think of what he stole right now. But let me think about that because that's what comics do. Comics steal things left and right. Back in those days, you could steal stuff, nobody would know where it came from. So, but anyway.
Well, here's the thing, actually. Right. So, didn't Jerry Lawler and Jim Cornette have the same joke book? So they'd always have a load of lines.
I'm sure they did. See, I didn't have a joke book. I couldn't afford one.
Is that not the way Jim was paying you mean?
Sometimes my joke was looking at my check. I said, that's a joke. Anyway, but I enjoyed my time there.
Very good. Right, we're going to shut down the show. Once again, if you want your question answered, or asked at least, on Ask Dutch Anything, you write to questionsfordutch@gmail.com. Once again, a reminder, there'll be more information on Dutch being on Cameo very, very soon, when all that information is with me, I guess. And then we'll put links in the descriptions of all the videos going forward. Until then, we will see you on Wednesday. It's been a few weeks, Dutch. I'm trying to remember when these shows come out. So,
hey, when will this come out?
This will be out on Sunday.
So how far is that from the 4th of July? A week?
I don't know. It's over a week. I'd have to check.
I don't know.
Well, no, hang on. From Sunday. Let me have a look. 4th of July is on a Friday.
Okay.
So don't worry. So don't worry. It won't be. It won't interfere with your celebrations and setting fire to stuff or however you celebrate that thing. There you go. As you celebrating seceding from our country and no longer being, colonials. There you go. Right, until then, we the people. See you on Wednesday.
We the people. See you then.